Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do a fake bow, and that is basically where you make the elements of the bow separately, so when it comes together it's going to end up looking like a complete finished bow. The first thing you want is a chenille needle, and a chenille needle is where the end is pointy and sharp, as opposed to a regular tapestry needle that you normally use a needlepoint where it's a more rounded blunt tip. And that is because when you pierce the ribbon, you want that sharp pointy end so that your ribbon doesn't run. I've got a lot of thick threads here, so I'm actually going to use the end of a laying tool to kind of make my hole bigger. This isn't totally necessary unless, like I said, you've already done a lot of stitching, but I think it's just going to help me out a little bit here. So the first step is to make your loops. And if you have less bulky stitching, you can even go down in the same hole. Because I've just got a lot of thread here, I'm going to go down in a hole next to it as opposed to the same one. But then you pull it through and make your loop, and the size of your loop is really just what is up to you. It's kind of a dealer's choice. If you making sure you get the right scale. Go down and make my other loop. Where you want, again, your loops about the same size. You can see here my right loop has kind of flipped and inverted. And again, you can take a laying tool or the end of your needle and kind of help flip that back over. If it happens, if the loops are going the opposite ways. Okay, so that is the first part, and you've got your loops. If you're making a larger bow, sometimes you might want to even tack it, either doing a lazy daisy and tacking it with the same thread, or you can take a little bit of clear beading thread and a beading needle and tack it down. My bow's pretty small and my loops don't really need to be tacked down, so that is that's the loops. That's the first part. So at this point, I'm going to run this thread through because, again, with ribbon, it's really easy to pull out your stitches, and I don't want to run the risk of that. So I'm just going to tie this off before I start the next steps, which is going to be the tails. So tie this off. Okay. And then I'm going to run my ribbon back through because, again, I don't want to interfere with those loops if I don't have to. Okay, and now I'm ready to do my tails. So I'm going to come back up pretty close to the center of that ribbon. But again, it doesn't have to be the exact center because we're going to cover all that up in the end. But basically where your tails are going to start. Okay, so come up in the center, and what you're going to do is a Japanese ribbon stitch. So that is where you lay the ribbon flat and about where you want the ribbon to end. So I want mine to be kind of long here. I want it to come all the way to about here. And if you want to make your ribbon curl and twist, you can do that again with a little bit of clear beading thread and a beading needle to tack it in place. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to kind of wherever it ends, just pierce the ribbon in the middle and pull all the way through. And again, this is where you don't want to pull too hard, because if you pull too hard, this little loop of the ribbon will pull all the way through. So there is one of my tails. Then I'm going to come do the same thing on the other side. Get another. If you're concerned about it, like I'm actually just running out of ribbon here, I'm going to tie this off. You can do it with the same piece of ribbon, but again, even as you're tying off, I held this little curly cue, so I didn't pull so hard that I pulled it through. Okay, so I'm going to come up again near the center, not exactly where everything is because you don't want it to be too thick, but close enough that we'll be able to hide it all in the end. So pull up my ribbon, lay it flat, kind of decide where you want your end to be, stab it in the middle of the ribbon, pulling through, but again, being really careful, you don't pull too hard and pull out that little loop that you're creating. So there's my tails. Then the last step of this sort of fake bow is the center. So again, sometimes I even tie off at this point as well, because again, you pull a little bit too hard and your bow is ruined and you got to start again. And don't get me wrong, when I do this, I mess up a lot and have to start over a lot, and that's okay. But the trick with ribbon, really, I tell people all the time, is do not pull too hard, do not pull too hard. Tell yourself 10 times and then once more before you do it, and you should be good to go. So now I've got my loops, I've got my tails, all I need is my center. So I'm gonna come up kind of right above the center of the loops and go kind of, again, right below the center of the loops, which will kind of encompass the starts of those tails too. And voila, you've got a fake bow.